So they do both. Please remember that they do both. They do cellular respiration, they do photosynthesis. So glycolysis, it's going to break down glucose. It's going to produce 2 ATP. And then Krebs cycle is also going to produce 2 ATP. Don't worry about writing the numbers down right now. I'll give you a table for that. And then electron transport chain produces most of the ATP, 36 ATP. Krebs cycle is also known as citric acid cycle. A lot of textbooks are calling it citric acid because they're trying to move and they're trying to give it more to the function. So the first product that Krebs cycle produces is citric acid. So that's why they call it citric acid cycle. So we have glycolysis giving you about 2 ATP, Krebs cycle, 2 ATP. Most of the energy is coming from here, electron transport chain. So we're going to basically zoom in on these processes and kind of look at what's happening in each step. So many of the reactions happen in mitochondria. So I said that before. Now let's look at the anatomy of the mitochondria. So how you have these folds. These are called cristae. One fold is crista and multiple cristae. There's the outer membrane and there's the inner membrane. So this mitochondria is found inside the eukaryotic cells, if you guys remember that. We talked about endosymbiotic theory, and that's when we said that mitochondria was a bacteria. And the reason we said that is because of the size of the mitochondria. It's small in size, as big as bacteria. And then it also has its own DNA. So it was its own cell. And then eukaryotic cell basically engulfed this bacteria and they live in a symbiotic relationship. Mitochondria gives energy, but it gets a place to live. So this mitochondria was its own basically bacteria. So it has two membranes, outer membrane and inner membrane, and then folds are called cristae. Yes, that's the inner membrane. And the folds are there because it gives it more surface area. And we did that math equation where we said that surface area versus volume, or the ratio of volume. So it gives it more surface area. And then the reason it needs more surface area, because that's where the electron transport chain happens. And it has a lot of molecules on that membrane. This is the inner membrane. This is zoomed in picture. There is the matrix inside, and then that's the inner membrane. That's the outer membrane. On the inner membrane is where the electron transport chain is happening, and that's happening through these molecules or the proteins. So these proteins are found on the inner membrane. If you have these folds, you have more space for these molecules. So that's the location again. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm outside. And then Krebs cycle happens here in the matrix. And then on this membrane is where electron transport chain happens. That's where the molecules are. So mitochondria have two phospholipid bilayers. So these membranes are made up of hydrophilic heads, hydrophobic tails, phospholipid bilayer, both of the membranes. And there is space in between. This space in between inner and outer membrane is called intramembrane compartment. And then the space inside the inner membrane is called a matrix. So that's just the anatomy of the mitochondria. It says that many enzymes span the inner membrane, catalyzing the reaction. So what this means is there's molecules found on the inner membrane that do the electron transport chain, basically, and produce energy. That's where that takes place. Between the mitochondria membrane is inner membrane. So that's right here, between outer and inner. And then in the matrix, this space inside the inner membrane is called the matrix. That's where Krebs cycle happens. Krebs cycle happens here, electron transport happens here, and then glycolysis happens outside.